Burials on the moon, the U.S. Defense Secretary's mysterious disappearance, and Congress returns just in time for another potential shutdown. Yes, another. Because doing the same thing and expecting different results is the definition of bureaucracy. That and more on this week's America Uncovered headlines. Welcome to America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. An unmanned lunar lander from aerospace company Astrobotic launched this week in an attempt to be the first commercial mission to the moon. Peregrine, as it was called, carried scientific equipment from NASA as well as human remains for space burial. Yes, space burial. I haven't seen someone dig their own grave around so many stars since Joe Coy's Golden Globe monologue. This would have been the first U.S. moon landing since 1972. Astrobotic is supported by NASA's Commercial Lunar Payload Services program, intended to ultimately help send astronauts to the moon again, or for the first time, according to my conspiracy theory-loving uncle. NASA Administrator Bill Nelson says they're scouts going to the moon ahead of us. Oh, so it's like how medieval kings used to have food tasters to make sure their food wasn't poisoned. Only instead of tasting food, they're sending Grandpa's ashes to space. Humanity's come such a long way. However, these moon burials are controversial. The largest group of Native Americans in the U.S. expressed their objection to landing human remains on the moon at a last-minute White House meeting. The Navajo Nation president says the moon holds a sacred place in Navajo cosmology. The suggestion of transforming it into a resting place for human remains is deeply disturbing and unacceptable to our people and many other tribal nations. I wonder what they'll say when people start building Arby's on the moon. However, their objections were ultimately unnecessary as the Peregrine mission was forced to abandon its moon landing after suffering a critical fuel leak. This must be disappointing for Astrobotics and even more disappointing for the relatives of the people whose remains were supposed to be buried on the moon. Well, you know what they say. Shoot for the moon. Even if you miss, you'll be buried among the stars. An Alaska Airlines flight was forced to make an emergency landing after a section of the plane blew off, sucking out passengers' belongings. Thankfully, no one was seriously hurt. And even more thankfully, this didn't happen on Spirit Airlines, which would have charged passengers extra for the refreshing breeze. Passengers took video of the aftermath and posted it on social media, which may or may not lead to the most dangerous new TikTok trend, the plane hole challenge. The door plug that blew off the plane was found in a Portland, Oregon area's teacher's backyard, which is shocking that they were able to afford a home with a yard in Portland on a teacher's salary. In response, Alaska Airlines CEO decided to ground the entire fleet for inspection. And those inspections didn't go well. The National Transportation Safety Board says the panel on the plane with the blowout may not have been properly attached. And Alaska and United Airlines announced they found loose bolts on the type of door plug that blew off on several of their Boeing 737 MAX 9 planes. This news caused Boeing stock market shares to plummet. After the incident, Alaska Airlines canceled 20% of its flights, and United canceled 7% of its flights. In total, Alaska has canceled 110 to 150 flights per day this week, which was historic, as it was the first time in either company's histories that so many of their flights actually weren't canceled. And after the break, the U.S. Secretary of Defense disappears. Welcome back. And welcome back to Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, who disappeared after he was hospitalized for 4 days following complications from what he initially described as a minor elective procedure. But it turned out to be treatment for prostate cancer. Wait, he considers surgery for prostate cancer to be elective? Well, since you choose to get it, I guess technically every surgery is elective, except for some in China. However, the White House didn't learn about Austin's hospitalization until 3 days after he was admitted. He returned to office after being in the hospital for 4 days, which not everyone was super happy about. Austin explains, "I could have done a better job ensuring the public was appropriately informed. I commit to doing better." He had a mystery illness he tried to keep secret from everyone around him. Obviously, he was bitten by a zombie. We have to keep him away from the president. Could you imagine what would happen if Joe Biden became a decrepit, shambling, incoherent... Oh, never mind. Former President Donald Trump said that Austin should be fired over this, explaining in a Truth Social post, failed Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin should be fired immediately for improper professional conduct and dereliction of duty. He has been missing for 1 week and nobody, including his boss, crooked Joe Biden, had a clue as to where he was or might be. Though to be fair, Trump's take isn't surprising since Trump loves firing people. Before being president, firing people was his whole brand. Well, that and collecting foreign wives like they were Pokemon cards. At the moment, President Biden does not plan on firing Austin over this. Coordinator for Strategic Communications at the National Security Council, John Kirby, says there is no plans for anything other than for Secretary Austin to stay in the job and continuing the leadership that he's been demonstrating. However, the Pentagon did order a 30-day review to go over how the notification process regarding Austin's hospitalization was botched. The situation has many concerned over the lack of transparency from the Defense Department. What's the big deal? So he was MIA for a few days. I mean, it's not like the U.S. is actively monitoring and supporting several global conflicts simultaneously and needs the Defense Department to be ready to communicate with them at any given moment. The world and all its nations, especially ones the U.S. is funding militarily, are totally at peace. In all seriousness, this is upsetting for many reasons, but lack of transparency isn't one of them. Because when has the military ever been fully transparent? Expecting transparency from the military is like expecting a ballet performance from Stephen Hawking, which would never happen since, he's probably not allowed near young ballerinas after showing up in the Epstein documents. And after the break, Chris Christie ends his presidential campaign. Welcome back. Chris Christie has ended his bid to become the Republican presidential candidate. He says, "It's clear to me tonight that there isn't a path for me to win the nomination, which is why I'm suspending my campaign tonight for President of the United States." Wait, it just became clear to him that there wasn't a path for him to win the nomination? He's been polling in single digits since he announced his campaign months ago. And America needs that kind of relentless optimism more now than ever, which is why America Uncovered is officially endorsing Chris Christie for U.S. President in 2024. Protesters from the Shut It Down for Palestine rally blocked traffic on 3 New York bridges. The rally was backed by the New York chapter of the Democratic Socialists of America, Jewish Voice for Peace, and the Palestinian Youth Movement. They demanded a ceasefire in the Israel-Gaza war, which is confusing because, like I said, the world and all its nations, especially ones the U.S. is funding militarily, are totally at peace. Didn't they get the memo? 330 protesters were arrested. New York City Mayor Eric Adams says he empathized with these protesters' cause, but not their methods, explaining the right to protest does not give one the right to block bridges and tunnels, as we saw this morning. The goal is to peacefully protest without doing major disruption to the city. Not only is their protest method controversial, it's not very effective, because New Yorkers are used to traffic, trains, and subways being delayed for no reason. So the fact that there is a reason for these delays, well, that's almost more refreshing than it is aggravating. Speaking of aggravating things that have no excuse, Nancy Pelosi's stock portfolio. According to government disclosures, Pelosi gained a 65% return on her stock portfolio in 2023, which is better than many hedge funds. Wow, she's so lucky. Besides stock trading, she should also take up Evel Knievel-style daredevil jumps while playing slot machines and eating sushi in Kansas. She can't lose. And if you're wondering why there wasn't a graphic for that scenario I just mentioned, it's because I'd need Nancy Pelosi's luck in the stock market to be able to afford to pay our effects guy to construct something that ridiculous. As lucky as Nancy Pelosi's stock trading has been, she barely cracked the top 10 best stock traders in Congress in 2023. The top 10 are evenly split between 5 Democrats and 5 Republicans, receiving between a 63% and 238% return on their investments. Boy, those are a lot of really lucky guesses. This is infuriating, but also kind of heartwarming, since it shows there are still some things Congress can truly be bipartisan about, like insider trading. That and praying the Jeffrey Epstein's client list never sees the light of day. Congress has conflict of interest rules that theoretically should stop its members from engaging in insider stock trading, but the Campaign Legal Center, a nonpartisan ethics watchdog group, claims Congress isn't enforcing these rules. And a bill was put forward by Democratic Senator Kirsten Gillibrand and Republican Senator Josh Hawley that would ban government officials from stock trading. But it was blocked quicker than a New York bridge during a pro-Gaza protest. Tell me if you've heard this one before. The U.S. government is on the verge of shutting down. We've gotten a bit of a break from hearing that, but only because Congress has been in recess for the past few weeks for the holidays. Well, they're back to work and talks of a shutdown began immediately. The deadline to fund the government is January 19th. I've had toys I won at carnival games that didn't stop working this quickly. House Speaker Mike Johnson struck a bipartisan $1.7 trillion funding bill, but several House Republicans opposed the plan and could derail it. Marjorie Taylor Greene explains, "I am a no to the Johnson-Schumer budget deal. This $1.6 trillion budget agreement does nothing to secure the border, stop the invasion, or stop the weaponized government targeting Biden's political enemies and innocent Americans." So we're once again in the will it, won't it shut down anxiety, only for a deal to be reached at the last minute that doesn't actually solve anything and just kicks the can down the road for this all to repeat again in another few months. Cycle. This is beyond stale and repetitive at this point. If reality were a TV show, it's so poorly constructed and executed, Joe Coy would blame it on his writers. And in my ongoing attempt to talk about all the things YouTube doesn't want me talking about by hiding it in video game content, check out this video about why you need God according to The Sims. And America Uncovered wouldn't exist without your support. Click that orange button to support us on Patreon. All it takes is $1 an episode and you can set a monthly limit. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.